So, I want to start by making sure we're all on the same page about what COVID is anyway. And so, you may have seen pictures that look like this. These are pictures of COVID. And COVID is a virus. Viruses really only contain three things: they have genetic material, like DNA or RNA, which codes for what they're going to do. That's this purple part in the center. They have a capsid, which is a covering that protects that genetic material. And they have a lot of surface proteins. And we're going to talk more about these surface proteins and why they're so important, especially as it relates to the vaccine. Um, the virus itself is called SARS. That stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Distress Syndrome. Um, CoV-2, that's the virus. COVID is the disease that SARS-CoV-2 causes. So, how does SARS-CoV-2 get into our bodies to cause COVID? I think of these proteins on the outside. Some of them are called spike proteins. I think of them like a key. And the key can go in a lock. And that lock in our bodies is called the ACE2 receptor. So inside our noses and our throats and our respiratory tracts, we have these ACE2 receptors. And if the SARS-CoV-2 virus, if that spike protein comes into contact, it's just like a key entering a lock. It opens it up and it can get inside. And that's how SARS-CoV-2 gets inside our body to cause COVID. One interesting fact is we develop a lot more ACE2 receptors, or we start expressing them, meaning having them available during puberty. And so this is one of the thoughts about why COVID might affect young people differently from adults, might be related to how many ACE2 receptors they have available. So, to summarize what we've said so far, SARS-CoV-2, which is the coronavirus, is what causes COVID, and COVID is the disease. This virus has a spike protein that acts like a key to let SARS-CoV-2 into our bodies to cause COVID. And adults have a lot more of these receptors than kids do. So now I have a question for you. How can SARS, and I guess this should say where can SARS-CoV-2 enter the body? And if one of my colleagues could just drop again the Pear Deck information in the chat, that'd be great. Gonna wait for a couple more responses. All right. Y'all are smart. I'm very impressed. There are a lot of adults that don't know this. Well done. So you are correct. So to get infected, particles from an infected person, meaning SARS-CoV-2 from an infected person, need to get in contact with a person's nose or mouth or eyes. So how do these particles go everywhere? Well, when you cough or when you talk, even if you put your hand in front of your mouth, you'll feel a little bit of moisture. Those are particles leaving your body. And if those particles have if your droplets have SARS-CoV-2, that can put them at risk of traveling. These particles leave our bodies when we cough, when we breathe, when we sneeze, when we laugh, and when we talk. So I want to talk a little bit about transmission because there's a lot of confusion publicly. And the truth is, in the beginning, scientists in the medical community weren't sure. And it's actually taken us a lot of time. In fact, there was new information that came out about this week. So, the primary way, the main way that COVID gets spread is through droplets. So, droplets are little moist bubbles, you can think of them, and they're pretty large and they fall within a few feet of us. Most of them fall within 3 feet of us and they fall pretty quickly. Most fall within 15 minutes' time. That's the most common way by far that COVID is spread. Less commonly is something called an aerosol. And these are teeny tiny particles that can stay suspended in the air. They can float in the air and stay there. And in the beginning, we were really afraid that aerosol would be the primary way of transmission. And that's really hard to control. And so we're really actually very lucky that it's a less common way. The way we get aerosols are when we cough or when we sneeze. That's what causes aerosols, the smaller particles to be released. And in the beginning, we were very worried about people being able to easily get COVID from surfaces. And just last week, the CDC said this is not a primary means of transmission. Is it possible? Could it possibly happen? Yes. But for the most part, this is not how people are getting COVID. And so touching surfaces is not a main way that people get COVID. It's really mostly from droplets. The other thing I want to make sure that you're aware of as you get close to reentering school is what a high risk exposure is. And so, medically, we define that as close person to person contact, meaning that you are within 6 feet of an infected person for more than 15 minutes. So, if I were to have COVID and you walked by me on the street, that's not a high risk exposure. That was a very brief passing, and it's not likely that you got a high viral load from that. It's really, if I were to have COVID, being close to me, being within 6 feet of me for more than 15 minutes, that's what would really put you at high risk. So now let's talk about school reopening and how we stay safe. That was another thing people said was important to them to talk about. And what I'd like to do is get from you on a spectrum, how risky does it feel to you to be returning to school? Maybe it's feeling really risky. Why are we doing this right now? Maybe it's hardly feeling risky at all. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. But I'd love to see what your thoughts are. How risky does it feel to return to school? Thanks, May. Thanks, Sophia. Oh, did I do this as an open ended one? I did. I made a mistake. My bad. Okay. I'm seeing an answer that says somewhat risky, scary, um, high risk. Thanks, everybody, for sharing your thoughts. I meant that to be a drag and drop. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you to everyone who submitted their thoughts. So, I've got good news for you. We've now been able to study this for a while, and there's a lot of studies that are looking at school reopening, and the news is really good. What we've learned is that with masks and distancing and hand washing, school is actually really safe in terms of viral transmission. In North Carolina, they studied more than 90,000 students. And what they found is that as long as masks were being worn, that was the most important thing, and there was distancing and hand washing, there were very few outbreaks. And there were actually more outbreaks in students who were doing distance learning than the ones who were doing in person school. So that's really good news for us. So far the data shows that school can be done safely. So what I want to talk to you